I never thought I'd be in such a dilemma. My mother comes from one of the largest packs in the Americas, a group known for its neutrality. Chapter 31. I'm your hype man. Mateo has been working in Alpha Overdrive, as I've been calling it, which he doesn't enjoy all too much ever since my father informed me that my mother comes from the Epicen's pack. That news was definitely a combination of lucky and unlucky. My mother is the daughter of the Alpha to one of the largest packs in the Americas. That same pack also just happens to be the most neutral pack known to man. Tell me that is not irony at its finest. Mateo has been trying his absolute hardest to win their alliance. But even with using me as an excuse, they just won't budge. I've tried telling him to just give it up already, but I think that's just making it worse. I think he's becoming frustrated with me by how calm I am with everything that's happening. Maybe it just hasn't sunk in yet. Maybe I'm just used to feeling fear at this point now. Obviously, I realize that what is happening is not okay. I understand that I am in danger and could very well die at any moment. It's hard not to when it's all that I ever hear about. I can't be outside alone. I can't have a meaningless conversation without someone bringing up how incredibly ignorant I am or how brave I am to be going through this without any fear. I can't do a single thing without having it somehow tie in with the fact that I'm being hunted by Vindicta. I just keep acting like it isn't happening. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. It's my sad attempt at trying to get things to return to normal. Jack told me that Hanselin. He's probably right. Not to sound annoying, but I just want to spend some time with him. I groaned as Jack threw a cheese ball into the air for me to catch. I smiled inwardly when I managed to catch it in my mouth for the 7th time in a row. It was cute when you said it the first 4 times, but now that you've said it at least 12, you're starting to get there, Jack commented. I rolled my eyes as he tossed another cheese ball into my mouth. I can't help it. I winned. I just want to be with him. I know. Jack finished my sentence for me. You really need to get a hobby. I have hobbies, I muttered. Like what? I like to practice my cursive, and I practice my math. My spelling. I stated a matter of factly. Jack gave me a pointed look in return. Those aren't hobbies. Those are things Mateo makes you do when he's trying to do something that you don't care enough to attempt to understand. Jack retorted as he launched another cheese ball at my face. This time, it bounced off of my forehead and rolled onto the floor. That was shit, I accused as I picked up the cheese ball off of the floor before inspecting it. Don't do it, Jack warned. With a shrug, I popped the cheese ball into my mouth, causing Jack to scrunch up his face in disgust. Do you know how many people walk on this floor? It is scientifically proven that food that has been on the floor for less than 1/12 of a minute is perfectly okay to eat. I countered. The look on Jack's face made it clear how much he didn't believe what I was saying. First of all, no, it's not. Raising one finger before raising another to make another point. Second of all, are you talking about the 5-second rule? See, I told you it's a real thing. Jack found that comment very unamusing. Maybe you just need some friends. I couldn't stop the scoff from escaping past my lips. I'll worry about making friends when I can take a walk outside without Ma keeping me on a leash. I mused, standing up from the leather sofa. You can make friends in the house. Jack countered as I picked up the tub of cheese balls from his lap and placed myself there instead. This place is going to make me kill myself. I grumbled as I leaned back into Jack and stuck my hand in the tub to pull out a handful of cheese balls. I quickly shoved the fistful into my mouth as if I hadn't eaten in days, when in reality I had just eaten 7 waffles about an hour ago. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? No, if anything, I don't think it was dramatic enough. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But it all sounded kind of muffled together because of the food in my mouth. Again, Jack scrunched up his face in disgust. Now I see why Mateo doesn't like to eat with you. I opened my mouth to reply, but Jack already beat me to it. Koya, you guys will spend time together later, he stated before I had the chance to speak. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was going to continue the conversation by saying that I'd been here for months, yet I feel like I never leave this house unless it's to travel to another country. I stated with irritation flooding into my voice. Well, that's because you don't. Well, thanks for being so blunt with me today. I kept my lips tightly shut, causing them to form a thin line. How do I argue with the truth? I mean, I'm sure I could find a way, but I would just be contradicting myself in the end. Hugging the tub of cheese balls against me, I leaned forward and stood up from Jack's lap. Without another word, I started walking out of the lounge. Where are you going? Jack called after me. I didn't stop. I just kept walking. Later isn't soon enough. I want to spend time with my mate. Koya, you know you're not supposed to go in there. Jack accused as he began walking after me. Really? I never saw a sign. Yeah, I wasn't supposed to interrupt Mateo. He was supposedly having serious conversations with some of the higher-ranking members of the pack about things I had no knowledge about at this point. He told me like a week ago that he was going to explain it all to me. That still hasn't happened. One would think that since all of the planning that has been going on revolves around my life, I would be informed a little. I guess I really can't complain. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was the one who didn't want anyone to acknowledge my impending doom. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It just makes me annoyed when the only person I would want to hear this stuff from isn't telling me a damn thing. I have some middle-aged woman going on her 7th child telling me that I'll be the reason for her family's demise. I was just steps away from Mateo's office door when a large hand caught hold of my forearm. I turned around to face Jack, who was looking at me like a parent who was about to scold their child about how biting other children is bad. He raised his hand and pointed to something behind me. In confusion, I turned around to see what he was pointing at. Taped to the door was a piece of paper that clearly read "Kae stay out." It was times like these when I realized just how predictable I must be becoming. I quickly snatched the paper off of the door. Well, it's a real shame that I can't tread, I said as I crumpled up the paper before shoving both the tub of cheese balls and the paper into Jack's hands. Leaving Jack in a state of speechlessness, I walked into Mateo's office. I questioned for a moment why he didn't just lock the door. The thought crossed my mind that maybe he just wasn't as intelligent as I've been giving credit for. I realized that it was most likely because he knew I'd make an appearance, and would rather I didn't make another giant wall hole. In his office were 2 other men aside from himself. They looked like they were older than Mateo by quite a few years. I'd never seen either of them before, but I didn't think on it too much. I had barely met all of the members in the central pack house, let alone his entire pack, which spanned over several states. Both men were seated in chairs in front of Mateo's desk. Mateo wasn't seated at his desk. He was standing with his body leaning against it. Kind of odd, but I didn't question it. My guess was that he just liked to look down at people rather than looking up to them. I didn't believe for a second that these men were tall enough for Mateo to look up to. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Mateo was mid-sentence when I walked in. Blinked, but never looked in my direction as I made my way over to him. His line of sight moved from the faces of the men to the wall behind them. The expression on his face was that look you give when you tell a child no. Don't do that, but they do it anyway. Like he wanted to kill me, but knew there was no way he ever could. I didn't think he was serious when he said she was going to ignore the sign and come in anyway. One of the men leaned over and whispered to the other. I'm sure he had no intentions of having Mateo or I hearing it. I chuckled quietly to myself as I sat down in Mateo's chair. I didn't say anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I didn't want to interrupt. Will the 2 of you give my mate and I 1 second alone? Mateo asked tightly. It was meant to be a question, but definitely came out as more of a direct order. Without another word from anyone, The two men stood up from their chairs and left Matteo's office. I thought that after they left, Matteo would say something, but the room stayed dead silent. He was making it very awkward for me. After a moment or two of just nothing, I heard Matteo sigh. He turned around to face me. His eyes were closed, and his left hand was balled into a loose fist. Slowly, he let out a deep breath and opened his eyes. I could just tell by how tensely he was clenching his jaw that he was trying not to strangle me. He'd better be careful that he doesn't break his teeth. "Kai, why is you here?" he asked calmly. His inner anger was still swimming in his dark blue eyes. "I'm your hype man." Apparently, that wasn't the right answer. Matteo had to close his eyes and take another deep breath. This was something new that Matteo had been doing. Jack says it's because Matteo has a hard time dealing with stress calmly, especially now that his mate is in more danger than he could have ever imagined. "Did you read the sign?" I responded with a lopsided smile and shook my head. "Couldn't read it." "Kaye, you wrote it. I made you write it so that you knew what it said." "Oh, so that's what he had me copy earlier." I wasn't really paying attention. I was just trying to make my handwriting look nice. I think he needed another deep breath. "Can we just go for a walk?" Trying to divert the conversation as I lay back into the chair. I internally winced as his jaw clenched impossibly tighter. "A walk?" He looked dumbfounded and pissed all at once. "You want to go for a walk?" "We don't have time to go for a walk," he snapped at me. Again. "Yes, we do," I shouted, exasperated lie. "We have plenty of time to take a 20-minute walk." "God forbid. He acts like the entire pack will start up in flames if we don't talk about what is happening for even a minute." "Kaya, you're in danger." "Oh my God, yes. I know." I groaned as I dramatically waved my hands around in the air. "Now, can we talk about anything else? You aren't taking this seriously." Matteo's voice was raising, which was making me raise mine. It was a vicious cycle that the two of us were all too familiar with. "Maybe you're taking this too seriously. Maybe you need to grow up." "Okay, that once stung a little. Maybe I don't want to be reminded every second of every effing day that I could die in the next 20. Had you thought about that?" I snapped, causing a silence to fall between us. I didn't mean to be so blunt. I was trying to keep my mouth shut and just accept that I messed up. I was having to deal with the consequences of what I had done so carelessly. But I didn't want to. I never had to before. I never had to make sure I had people ready to defend me. No one else needed involved when I did something stupid before. But that's completely out the door at this point. Now it feels like the entire world thinks I'm an idiot, all because that's how it works in these stupid packs. Matteo's face, that once held an angry expression, now looked kind of sorry. "So, I don't care if I sound childish. For once, I just want to think about anything else." My arms were crossed over my chest, and I was refusing to meet the oceanic blue eyes of my mate. I kept my gaze solely on the desk in front of me. I expected a snappy remark, but it never came. I was surprised when a hand was held out to me instead. Confused, I looked up with furrowed brows, silently questioning Matteo. "You already know that I've never been good at saying no to you," Matteo said, trying to keep a stoic expression. I could hear the small bit of annoyance laced in his tone. It wasn't a secret that alphas don't enjoy being weak for anyone. I just so happened to have a mate who let me walk all over him despite what he would like. I smiled, knowing that he was referring back to when I wanted to go for a walk. Not wasting another minute, I grabbed his hand and practically drug him outside. It was certainly not the warmest weather. I was surprised there wasn't any snow continuing to collect on the ground. We had finally just managed to make it out of the worst of February's cold weather. It made me laugh a little at thought of it being in February. Who would have guessed that I'd make it this long? My quiet chuckle caught Matteo's attention. He was walking beside me as we took a popular running trail through the woods just behind the pack house. I was too busy snapping lodems off of trees to notice his eyes watching every move I made. "What?" Catching me off guard as I jumped up to grapple him. "Too damn short," I thought to myself as my hand missed the limb by nearly a foot. "Why do you laugh?" he asked as I rubbed my cold hands together. Seeing that my hands were no doubt minutes from becoming hypothermic, he pulled his hands out of his coat pockets and held them out for me to take. I smiled and bounced over to him. I placed my hands in his and instantly felt my hands beginning to warm up from the heat of his. I'm not a teenager anymore, I stated before taking a brief pause. Well, I mean, I haven't been for like 3 weeks or something. 3 weeks. His brows furrowed in confusion. Your birthday was 3 weeks ago. Well, I don't know for sure. My mom said she thinks my birthday is January 21st. I stated simply with a shrug. Matteo frowned slightly and moved his right thumb around in a circle on the back of my left hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it made this weird, bubbly feeling erupt within me, making me want to vomit, but in a good way. Happy birthday. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Obviously a little annoyed that he was unaware I had become the big 20. I rolled my eyes and pulled my hands away from his. I walked away from him to start my assault on nature. Again, instead of targeting a tree limb this time, I picked up a rock and chucked it at a tree as hard as I could. It broke into several smaller pieces on contact. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Not the tree. Did you ask your father about your mother? Instantly, I cringed at the mention of both of my parents. I didn't really understand why he was asking. He already knew everything that I did. Matteo, I told you I don't want to know. Not where she's from. Where she is. He quickly corrected. I paused for a moment, bending down to pick up another rock on the trail. Oh no, I said with a grunt as I launched the rock at another tree that I missed completely. I sighed as I searched the ground for another rock. Aren't you at all curious? He wasn't directly beside me as he had been earlier. No doubt he was trying to keep a little bit of distance so that I didn't hit him with a rock. I shrugged a little as I bent down to pick up another rock. Yea then, why didn't you ask? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Placing the rock back onto the ground, I turned around to see Matteo trailing behind me at a safe distance. My mother was a really big believer in standing by your mate until one of you ended up dead. You don't think she's dead? I don't think she just left. Admitting it made my chest feel sort of heavy. It made it a little hard to swallow. Oh, hell. It broke a little bit of me to think that my mother was definitely laying dead in some unmarked grave in the middle of God knows where. Sensing my mood change, Matteo walked up to me and brought me into a hug. I knew he only did it because he was the shittiest person at comfort using his words. It is especially true when I get upset when it comes to my family. We both learned that over the past few months. My arms wormed around his waist as his wrapped around my shoulders. His lips kissed the top of my head, which was laying against his strong chest. Its warm sensation down my spine bringing back that weird feeling. For one of the first times since I'd ever met Matteo, I wasn't thinking about how much better the scenario would be if we just shed a few layers of clothing. I was oddly content in the position we were in, jackets on and all. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Warm feeling seemed to spread and ultimately settle in my chest. It sent my mind into a foreign state of euphoria and made my heart rate accelerate. Sleeves of an unfamiliar warmth stretched down my arms and legs, making me have to hold myself back from wiggling my fingers around to make sure that they were still there. I pulled my head back from his chest, allowing me to look up at him. Our eyes connected, which sent my mind over the edge. My heart was thudding against my chest so hard that it hurt. I was nearly freezing just minutes ago. But the moment our eyes connected, my entire body lit up. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. And I had a slight inkling why. His head tilted to the left slightly in confusion as my eyes searched his, as if my life depended on it. I couldn't possibly bring myself to think of, let alone say, what I knew I was feeling. I'm not sure if I even fully felt it for myself, much less Matteo. That somehow my body was telling my mind differently in this moment. I couldn't possibly say it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I unwound my arms from Matteo's waist. For a moment, the confusion in his face grew until my hands found the back of his neck. I brought his head down to mine, so that my lips had the opportunity to meet his. I'd kissed Matteo a lot. That was no secret. Nearly every argument that we'd ever had ended with our lips locked. We were very good at the whole kiss and makeup thing. So yeah, I kissed Matteo a lot. I kissed a lot of people before him. To hell. I had sex with a lot of people before Matteo. I kissed and almost had sex with Jack. For God's sake. But believe me when I say that I'd never experienced any sort of sensation within my mind and body, like I did in that very moment when Matteo's lips met mine. The kiss wasn't heated or lusty. I had no intentions of ripping off every layer of clothing covering our bodies. The thought never even crossed my mind. My hands didn't wander every curve and devote of his body in an attempt to take things farther. And neither did his. It was the most simple kiss shared between the two of us, but somehow felt the most significant. It sparked up a feeling within me, just solidifying the fact that I managed to get into another situation involving yet another word. Chapter 32. Drive safe. I like you in a way that I've never liked anyone else. Matteo. I think that I took a deep breath. My tongue was so dry and now that it felt like I was sucking on sandpaper. I knew how I was feeling. I just needed to spit it out. I can't do this, I concluded, turning away from my reflection in the mirror. This week has been a non-stop struggle of attempting to be honest about how I feel with Matteo. Unfortunately, it was not as easy as the internet led me to believe. I was trying tip 6 from Cosmopolitan by trying to rehearse in the mirror what I wanted to tell Matteo. But it was a big, fat failure, just like the last 5 tips. I tried writing it out, dropping hints, and even told him to drive safe. It didn't make much sense since he wasn't driving anywhere. He was mid-bite of a sandwich in the kitchen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But the article I skimmed over told me that it would work. Cosmopolitan has really let me down this past week. Maybe I should try to recite poetry to him. I muttered to myself, thinking about how terribly it went the first time. Apparently, "Oh Captain, My Captain" by Walt Whitman is not a good poem to use when you're trying to profess your feelings for someone. Kai, I jumped and turned around to see Matteo in the doorway of the bathroom. Christ. Matteo, you scared me, I snapped, bringing my hand up to my chest. I could feel my heart beating wildly against the palm of my hand. Were you saying something? He asked in confusion, completely ignoring my snappy comment. My heart rate managed to accelerate even more than I'd imagined possible. No. I shouted way too quickly, which seemed to confuse my poolmate even more than he already had been. I mean, yeah, kind of. Not to you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So get out. For some reason, that sounded like it was going to be nicer than just hollering no. In his face, with confusion plastered across his face, he slowly turned around and walked out of the bathroom. I let out a heavy sigh and grabbed the sides of the sink, allowing my head to hang down lazily. Nope. Nope. I muttered to myself as I shook my head. I'm not sure what part of what just happened I was trying to forget, but it wasn't working. I would have probably thrown up right then and there if Matteo heard me talking about him so lovey-dovey to myself in the mirror. Maybe that's what I was trying to do. Convince myself not to vomit. I raised my head up to look at myself. I winced when I noticed just how flushed my cheeks were and rapidly smacked them a few times to try to make myself look like I wasn't on the verge of dying. My annoying, middle schoolgirl emotions were starting to get on my nerves. I'd never dealt with these types of embarrassing emotions before, grumbling to myself about how I was acting stupid. I left the bathroom. Upon entering our bedroom, I stopped dead in my tracks when I noticed Matteo hadn't actually left. He was seated quietly on our bed with his eyes watching my every move. It was almost as if he thought that I was going to disappear the moment he looked away. I told you to get out, I deadpanned, crossing my arms over my chest. I did, he countered. I pursed my lips as I thought about what he was saying. I meant our entire living space. Not just the bathroom. Jackass, I muttered, walking toward him. He stood up from the bed and simultaneously shot me a lopsided smile. I took the opening of his arms as an invitation for a hug, so I gladly took it. Obviously, I was going to take any chance that I could to feel up on my hunk of a man. I thought that we were just going to share a short hug like most other times that Matteo decides to feel affectionate. But instead his hands placed themselves firmly on my waist and his body began swaying back and forth. What are you doing? I chuckled as my body swayed in the same rhythm as his. One of the only good memories I have of my parents was watching them dance when I was younger. He admitted quietly as our swaying began to pick up a bit. It was one of the only times I saw either of them actually happy. I locked my fingers together behind his neck and pulled away enough to be able to look at his face. Apparently, he didn't like that because one of his hands left my waist and moved to the back of my head where he pushed my face back onto his chest. Matteo, I laughed as I tried pulling my head back, but his hand refused to allow me. While his one hand remained on the back of my head, the other found its way below my butt and hoisted me up so that he was now holding me. I laughed wildly as my legs wound around his waist and he spun us around. As usual, whenever the two of us have any sort of light-hearted moment, something always feels the need to end it. In the midst of our banter, a knock sounded from the other side of our closed door. I could immediately sense the shift in Matteo's mood. Our spinning halted and Matteo dropped his hand from my head. Before I had time to look up at him, he released me from his grasp. As well, yes. Matteo's voice was void of any of the happy-go-lucky emotion that filled it just moments ago. As a result, my mood dropped too. I tried looking at Matteo's face to see if he looked just as stoic as he sounded, but he was staring directly at the door, which limited what I was able to see. "The biter has sent," a boy began to say, but Matteo interrupted before he had the chance to finish. "Open the damn door." On cue, the door opened, revealing a boy who couldn't have possibly been older than me. I would even go as far as saying he didn't even look old enough to be graduated from high school yet. His eyes only remained on Matteo for short periods of time before moving to me, and then to anything behind the two of us. "The biter has sent me to retrieve you. There was suspicious activity about half an hour north," the boy said quickly. I wanted to laugh at how uncomfortable Matteo was making this poor kid. "Half an hour north?" Matteo asked, causing the boy to nod. "Yes, in Bjørnden," he concluded. I was assuming that Bjørnden was just the location where the kid was referring to. "And Jack is already there?" "Yes, he took 5 of us with him early this morning when he got news that one of the patrols went missing. He has suspicions that someone may have found their way into the territory and noticed." "Wait, someone is missing? Like gone? They haven't found him?" Suddenly interested in more than just how awkward this kid was. "We searched everywhere in a 5-mile radius of where he was supposed to be, but couldn't find anything," he replied, seeming nervous. I was confused why his anxiety seemed to build so suddenly until I looked up at Matteo. Again, if there is one thing scarier than my mate when he is obviously angry, it is when he seems completely calm. His facial features can hold such serenity, yet his eyes always manage to expose just how infuriated he truly is on the inside. "Take us there," Matteo ordered, which took me completely by surprise. There was no way that he was actually referring to me. Matteo never takes me with him when it has to do with his pack. "Yes, I'm not leaving you here alone," he explained, staring down at me sternly. "It would be stupid to leave you with a threat so close. You're safer with me than you'll ever be in this house." I didn't argue. I didn't want to argue for once. "To my agent extraordinaire, Mylin Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Kishut's enthusiasm." Despite the fact that someone was missing and there was a possibility that our borders had been compromised, I was excited to finally experience Matteo in an alpha situation that wasn't just in his office. It made me feel a little cocky thinking that Matteo thought a little better of me. To be honest, I knew that wasn't the reason he was having me go with him to Bjørnden. "To my agent extraordinaire, Mylin Nilben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He just wanted to keep an eye on me because he didn't trust anyone else to do it. I don't know why I was shocked when we went outside, ended into a vehicle. I suppose traveling in wolf form just wasn't something that I thought of pack wolves doing. It wasn't exactly the safest thing to frolic around as a giant wolf all of the time. I'd only seen Matteo's wolf a few times, and that was from a good distance. Originally, I had always thought that his wolf was a dark obsidian. I was proven wrong this day. Without any sort of warning, he shifted into a wolf with a rich, dark coat of brown fur. The undertones of red that could be seen from up close when the sunlight reflected off of him is what really surprised me. His coat was not this impressive through the window of our room, just when I would watch and wait for him to come home. I was hesitant to shift in front of Matteo. I hadn't shifted in years. When I left Vindicta, I was far too weak to take on a shift, and after meeting Matteo, I never felt the need to. I could hardly remember what my wolf even looked like until I had shifted and looked down at my legs and paws. I chuckled inwardly as the familiar dark grey fur came into view, triggering memories of my scrawny little wolf to pop into my head from when I was only like 13. I wasn't exactly the barged wolf. If anything, I'd say I was generally on the smaller side. It did make it easier to weave around obstacles when I was running. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. After I shifted, I uncomfortably stood in front of Matteo for a moment. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't the obvious once-over of approval I got. Compared to Matteo's wolf, I was laughable. He stood proudly with a tall, broad stature which would clearly topple any human. His fur was thick and shined radiantly as the wind blew through it just slightly. I was short, thinner than the average wolf, and, to this day, still believe that my left ear is slightly larger than my right. My wolf was kind of a joke. Thankfully, we didn't waste much time staring at each other like a couple of creeps. I'm sure Matteo was much more focused on the importance of a potential break-in than what my sad little wolf looked like. It took us about 45 minutes to get to BR. It should have taken only about 30, but I got tired and needed a quick break. Matteo wasn't too pleased when I flopped my body dramatically on the ground, but he stopped too. Nevertheless, as I relaxed on the ground trying to bring my breathing back to normal because I was the most out of shape that I had definitely ever been, yes. I'm including birth. Matteo just paced back and forth, growling lowly. I knew that if I could hear what he was actually saying, he would be grumbling to himself about how inappropriate this was and how irresponsible I was being. Something cool about pack wolves that I never quite understood was their ability to communicate. Obviously in my human form, I was subpar at communicating with every living thing that haunted the planet. In my wolf form, I had absolutely no communication with anything unless it was through a solid nod. Pack wolves, on the other hand, had this ability to speak mentally with one another in their wolf forms. Odd, I know. Well, I realized this was an issue for me the moment Matteo. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And I all met up with two other wolves which, by their scent, I could identify as Jack and another pack member. I was naive to think that, once we arrived, we would all just shift back into our human forms to converse like normal people. Apparently, that isn't how packs work because I had to stand beside Matteo in a dead silent, as the four of them all had silent, mental conversations about a man who went missing for 20 minutes. I can't begin to explain how confused I was every time I would see one of them nod or wince. I was trying to figure out what Matteo could have said to Jack to make him wince for a 5th time when the wolf that Jack had been with when we had arrived quickly diverted his attention to the right of him. Just mere seconds later, Matteo and Jack did the same. I wanted so badly to ask what we were all supposed to be looking at when the sound of screaming met my ears. I wanted to say, "What the FK?" but it only came out as an awkward, confused whine. Without warning, Matteo slammed against my body with his managing to throw me to the side. I rolled once or twice, but was still able to clearly see the large wolf that had just attacked the boy that had led Matteo and I here. That wolf was being followed by 3 others, one of which was obviously the leader by the way it stood back and watched as the 2 others went for Jack and Matteo. Or it really lacked any sort of skill in teamwork. Matteo easily managed to throw the poor wolf that attacked him into a tree while Jack seemed to struggle the slightest bit with his. I was surprised that he was having a hard time, to be honest. But he seemed a bit distracted by the wolf who was slowly making its way toward Matteo. That only lasted a moment. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Before Jack had his offender pinned to the ground, I also was a bit distracted by the wolf that was making its way toward my man. I swore on my soul that if that wolf got its nasty muzzle around any part of my mate, I was going to sacrifice it to my father. I'd say the devil, but I think that would be just a bit too easy. Thankfully, Matteo wasn't an idiot and realized he was being approached. He growled lowly as the 2 circled one another. To say that I was becoming nervous would be an understatement. I was nervous for good reason. This wolf was obviously well trained. Each step that Matteo took was equally matched by it. I'm not sure if Matteo was just going easy on it for fun or if he needed to step up his game. Either way, I was very uneasy. Second, I knew the advantages of being a shorter wolf. This wolf only stood a few inches taller than me. One of the greatest advantages this wolf had on Matteo was the access to the spot that could kill him in seconds. I wasn't about to just let that happen. I watched as the wolf crouched down into a lower stance. I scoffed to myself as I thought of how sneaky this bitch must feel. As quickly as I could, I positioned myself under Matteo's head, in front of his chest. I whined quietly, keeping my head low, but also making sure that any access that the wolf would have to Matteo's neck was blocked. Matteo didn't really like that idea because his low growls just grew deeper as he attempted to nudge me away. If I could have spoken to him, I would have said, "Not happening, buddy." I whined a bit louder, managing to catch the attention of the other wolf. It glanced at me briefly before scoffing. I was both grateful that this wolf was dumb enough to not catch on to what I was doing and annoyed that it believed I was this much of a wimp. Despite Matteo's obvious dislike, I kept myself tucked in his chest with my eyes glued to the wolf in front of us. It swiftly lurched forward. Had I not been stuck directly against Matteo in the moment, he would probably have a good chunk taken out of him. Luckily, that wasn't the case. I raised my head and snapped, causing the wolf to fall back. It was obviously not expecting me to fight back. Again, I was slightly annoyed. Was this stupid broad not aware of the reason I was locked up in the first place? There was absolutely no doubt that we were being attacked by some of Vindicta's little assassins. One would think that they would give these oafs a little history lesson on the person that they are attempting to kill before they send them out to do it. The wolf regained its stance and growled lowly at Matteo and I. Mainly just me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Its eyes were focused directly on me with such intensity that I might have peed myself had I not been in worse situations. Matteo noticed the wolf's attentions switch more heavily to me, which didn't seem to please him at all. In an attempt to shield me from any potential danger, he tried to step over my small frame and get me behind him. I growled lowly in retaliation as I avoided his attempt by moving forward and making myself taller by standing straighter. I could practically feel the anger wafting off of him. I was so getting my ass handed to me later. The wolf tottered back and forth on its front and assessed the situation. I assumed by this point, it realized what strategy I had chosen. Our eye contact was incessant. Neither of us dared to remove our gaze from the other. Well, that was until 3 more wolves emerged from the brush behind the wolf in front of Matteo and I. For a moment, fear flooded my body as I tried to process how our outsiders managed to cross into our borders. But my worries were quickly washed away when I noticed the wolf's reaction. Its attention was immediately snatched from me to the 3 threats now lurking behind it. It was obvious that as the wolf began to look around nervously at Matteo's pack members and the 2 of us, it didn't have a single plan in mind. From a rogue's point of view, that just makes everything worse. The wolf's head darted around, frantically searching for a way out as the 3 pack members drew closer. Its eyes eventually found me, Once again, as if it was instinctual, she charged directly at Matteo and I. I knew she was acting out of fear, so she had no plan to her attack. I was prepared to take whatever snap she was about to throw at me in an attempt to get at either Matteo or myself in order to cause some sort of damage. But it never came. A short yelp fled its mouth as it tumbled for a moment. I stood watching in complete confusion as the wolf swayed for a few more seconds before collapsing into a heap on the ground. Shit. I immediately recognized Jack's voice. I snuck out from under Matteo to see Jack several yards away holding what seemed to be a gun. I cocked my head to the side in confusion as I watched Jack stare in disbelief and awe at the wolf. FK. I looked back at Matteo to see him watching Jack the same way that I had been. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Everyone was looking at Jack. I moved my attention to the wolf on the ground who was still breathing, unlike the other two wolves who were either dead or knocked out cold. But it was nothing more than a compant by this time. I walked toward it slowly until I could see to be a dart of some sort in its left side. Tranquilizer, I assumed. I got here as quickly as I could. What's everyone standing around for? Daniela asked as she ran up to the group of us. It was obvious that there was some sort of weird tension stirring among the group despite none of us knowing why. She caught on pretty quickly that Jack was the reason behind all of our silent staring. Her gaze fixed upon him, and then followed his gaze to the wolf on the ground. Her eyes flickered between the two as she seemed to be connecting dots that I couldn't. "Oh, you're kidding," she finally said. Jack shook his head. "Nope." I could tell Matteo and the other members of his pack that were around us were all having a conversation which left me completely out of the entire loop. I stomped my front paw like a child and whined. "Oh, keep up. Kaye." Donnie scoffed as she crossed her arms. I cocked my head to the side. Again, but my confusion was quickly cleared up by Jack. "She's my mate." Chapter 33. Come here, I've seen Matteo mad plenty of times. I've watched him almost strangle Baron after making a snide comment about my unfortunately disproportionate forehead. I've seen the internal turmoil within his dark eyes when Jack pushed me off of a chair. And there have been plenty of instances when Matteo was angry with me for stupid things I had done. Being angry just seemed to be Matteo's normal state of being. So much so that by this point, I wasn't very affected by it. Well, I didn't believe I was. I couldn't quite connect all the dots after Jack made his declaration. I thought that maybe I was just having a late reaction, and it would all sink in 5 minutes or so. Well, about an hour passed, and I still wasn't making any pictures with my stupid dots. Coincidentally, after the whole incident, Daniela brought everyone something to shift back into except for me. I wasn't too bothered by it because I just assumed that I would stand around and listen to them in wolf form. But Matteo had other plans. He instructed 2 of his men to take me back to the house. I tried to fight it, but I knew I wasn't going to win. I decided it would just be best to listen. I wasn't happy about it, but I went back to the pack house with 2 of Matteo's men. I already knew I was in for an argument with Matteo. That was a given. Anyone could have guessed that he was going to be angry that I chose to put myself in danger in order to protect him. I would never take it back. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Quite frankly, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Being the nosy little kid that I am, I intently sat in Matteo's chair and watched the security cameras from his computer. It had quickly become one of my favorite guilty pleasures. The amount of stupid things that I catch people doing astonishes me. But I wasn't watching just random pack members accidentally knock over a stack of plates onto themselves. I was watching Matteo and about 7 other pack members, one of them being Jack, place the 3 wolves into 3 separate cells. Interesting form of reality TV you got going on there. Daniela chimed as she poked her head into the room. I furrowed my brows together in annoyance, not removing my gaze from the screen. I thought I locked that door. I was kicked out of the operation, so now I have to watch from here. I grumbled as I focused in on Matteo talking to 2 of his men. I couldn't help but be annoyed that I didn't know what they were talking about. Why don't security cameras have sound? Yay, he really did not seem the happiest with you earlier. Donnie chuckled as she came into the room and closed the door behind her. I didn't even do anything. He's being dramatic. Donnie sat down in one of the chairs in front of Matteo's desk. She didn't say anything. She angled the computer a tad toward her so that we were both able to see what was going on. I flickered my eyes over to her to see her eyes focus directly on the screen. I clenched my teeth together and contemplated which question I should ask her first because the Lord knows I had a few of them. Stop staring at me, she snapped without removing her gaze from the live video on the screen. Why did you lie? I asked bluntly. You've got to be more specific. I lie a lot, she replied in a bored tone. Becoming annoyed, I angled the computer screen away from her. Why did you tell me that Jack had a mate when he obviously didn't? I accused. Werewolves get one mate. There aren't any do-overs. Any second chances. There was no way Jack would have already had a mate if the psycho bitch that tried to kill me and my man is his mate. Donnie leaned back into her chair as a pondering look covered the features of her face. I told you that. Yes, Donnie stopped to think for a moment. Her head dropped to the side a bit and her eyes blankly looked down at the desk. I couldn't begin to explain how badly I wanted to choke her in that moment. In what context? That just managed to increase my want to strangle her. Are you kidding me? I asked, exasperation. Does it look like I'm kidding you? You told me that Jack had a mate, but she died. You said something about some sort of weird accident or whatever. Do you really not recall this? I was beginning to think by the bored look on Daniela's face that I was going crazy. No, she stated bluntly. You said it. I shouted as I pointed at her accusingly. You told me that his mate died after the two of you kidnapped me when I was being petty and ran away. You ran away. Am I in a simulation or something? I shouted at the ceiling as my hands ran through my hair. Who are you shouting at? She asked, looking up at the ceiling. The simulation. Okay. Crazy. Calm down, Donnie said without a hint of amusement in her voice. Explain to me again what I lied about. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and pinched my arm as hard as I could. What are you doing? Trying to make sure I'm not in a simulation, I answered as my eyes remained shut, and my fingers continued to pinch my arm. After a few more seconds, I let go of my arm and opened my eyes to see Daniela staring at me like she was watching a kid in sand. Are you done? Yes, I sighed as I leaned back into my chair. After Matteo and I had that fight in the training grounds, I ran off the territory. You've got to remember when you found me with a dead guy. Realization hit her in that moment, and her mouth turned into air now. Oh yeah, I forgot what happened. You wouldn't talk to Jack after that. She recalled, making me smile, yes. And you told me that I should listen to Jack because he had a mate before. But you lied. I accused. Donnie pursed her lips and nodded slowly. Yes, I did. She agreed. Good job. She reached over to move the computer screen back toward her. But I smacked her hand away. Why? I counted as I turned the screen even more toward me. Donnie let out a heavy breath and crossed her arms over her chest. Gosh, Kaye, I don't remember. It was probably just the easiest way to get you to agree to talk to Jack at that time. I'm sure by this point my eyes were bugging out of my head. I couldn't help but wonder how many other times has she lied to me. Now, let me see. Daniela snapped as she grabbed the computer screen and brought it toward her. You are so rude, I stated it in astonishment. She didn't answer me. She just shrugged and continued watching the screen. Her eyes narrowed for a moment before mumbling, What the hell? To our agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I asked just as the door of Matteo's office opened up. Daniela and I both turned toward the door to see Matteo walking in. The minute he entered the room, the air felt 10 degrees colder. Something about the look in Matteo's eyes the moment they landed on me made a hollow pit form in my stomach. Daniela, out, Matteo ordered. The deadly, cold tone of his voice made my mouth dry. There was something different about Matteo's anger this time that made the blood in my veins feel like ice. He wasn't just angry, he was infuriated. Yes, Alpha. Daniela complied as she left the room silently with her head down. It was obvious that she was just as frightened by Matteo in this moment as I was. An eerie silence settled between the two of us. For the first time since I had seen my father just weeks ago, I was scared to speak. I don't think that I had ever been afraid to speak to Matteo, but there are definitely firsts for everything. Come here, Matteo said calmly. I swallowed nervously but stood up from his chair. Nonetheless, I didn't make any attempt to walk over to him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The cold look in his eyes kept my feet planted to the ground. Kaye, now. I could feel the authority in Matteo's order wrap itself like two hands around my neck, making it hard to breathe. His jaw was clenched to the point that I was afraid he may break his teeth. My eyes kept flickering from his hand that was balled into a fist at his side back up to his dark eyes. I'm not coming over there until you calm down, I said, trying to keep my voice as even as possible. Kaya, listen to me when I speak to you. He snarled angry. My lips locked shut and my jaw clenched. My silence obviously didn't settle well with Matteo because he lurched toward me with long, deliberate strides. I took a step backward, but it wasn't a match for Matteo's movements. His hand wrapped itself around my forearm, and he pulled me close to him. Out of instinct, I growled and aggressively shoved him away from me. He let go of my arm and stumbled backward. I took that as my opportunity to bolt out of the room. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I refused to stop until I was inside of our room. I could hear his heavy footsteps trailing behind me. Jack. Not knowing what else to do. I had never seen Matteo more angry in all of the time that I had known him. Jack. Kaye. I slammed the door behind me and ran into our bathroom. Kaye. I locked the door and climbed into the shower on the opposite end of the bathroom. I sunk down onto the floor of the shower and watched the door as my chest heaved up and down. Shit. I swore to myself as I realized I didn't lock our bedroom door. That soon became obvious when the door of the bathroom flew open. You broke the door, I shouted accusingly, seeing pieces of wood on the floor from where he'd broken part of the frame. Matteo didn't answer me. He just stalked toward me, grabbed each of my forearms, and pulled me up so that we were face to face. Listen to me when I speak to you. I am your alpha. He snarled in my face. Sharp canines were brought into my view, making my throat feel tighter. In that moment, I knew I was not only dealing with an angry Matteo, but an angry alpha wolf. Matteo. My arms, I sputtered as grip tightened. It wasn't super painful, but his grip sure wasn't pleasant. My comment seemed to come completely over his head because he didn't loosen his grip at all. When I want you to move out of the way, you move out of the way. You will not disobey. Do you understand? His question came out between clenched teeth. I was just trying to. I don't give a FK what you were trying to do. He shouted at me as he shook me out of anger. I could just barely hear heavy footsteps coming into the room over Matteo's furious hollering. You don't put yourself in dangerous positions, and then disobey me. Matteo, let her go. I instantly recognized Jack's voice. Shortly after hearing him, I saw him emerge into the bathroom. Matteo must not have noticed or cared because his eyes continued to bore into mine. Do you understand? He repeated, raising his voice. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Matteo, you've got to calm down. You're going to hurt her. Jack shouted as he wrapped his arms around Matteo and attempted to pull him off of me. Jack wasn't strong enough. Matteo's hands gripped my arms tighter, sending a painful jolt through my arms. I inhaled sharply from the sensation. My fists found themselves balling into fists, and my arms wrenched backward, successfully breaking Matteo's grip. You're hurting me. I growled out in both physical and emotional pain as I raised my right leg and sent him backward with a kick to the chest. This allowed Jack to gain control over Matteo as he pulled Matteo out of the room. Dude, please. You've got to stop. Jack's plea was followed by a loud thud, which I assumed was Matteo throwing Jack off him, and the loud slam of our door. My teeth ground themselves together, and a painful sting resided within my throat. My chest rose and fell violently as I just stood in the shower staring at the broken pieces of wood on the floor. I wasn't sure how many minutes had passed that I spent just standing there. At some point in that time, my right hand found its way to my left forearm where it cradled the place that Matteo's hand had just been. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I wanted to respond to the worried voice that had entered the room, but I didn't trust my voice. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Daniela repeated as her small frame peeked into the bathroom. Our eyes connected, and a frown emerged on her face. Oh no, she mumbled sadly as she walked toward me. She reached out slowly to grab my arms, taking each of them in her hands. She pulled them toward herself so that they were more visible to her. Her frown deepened as she looked up to see the look on my face. I've never seen him this angry. I wanted to agree, but I was too busy staring down at the bright red marks currently encircled around my forearms where Matteo's hands held me so tightly. I genuinely don't know why he would do that. He's always so in control of his anger, Donnie said, making my heart feel almost as cold as Donnie's hands on my arms. Please. Go, I whispered as I retracted my arms from her hands. Kaya, you. Please. I cut her off abruptly. Leave. My tone was pleading but cold to the bone. With a sad look, Daniela left me to be alone in the bathroom. I couldn't quite put my finger on what I was feeling. I was definitely not happy. That was for sure. Sad, upset. Yes, but maybe confused would be the better word to use. Anger was there, and it made sure that I was well aware of its presence. The ache in my hands wanting to send my fist straight into Matteo's face was overwhelming, but that also could have very well been the intense feeling of needing to seek revenge burning through my body. Undeniably, I could feel one emotion lurking behind all of those fear. I wasn't fearful of Matteo because he hurt me. I don't think he intended to leave any sort of mark on me. I was sensible enough to know that. I was fearful, however, that he was going to come back and do it again. It scared me to think that maybe Matteo wasn't acting out of anger toward me, but out of hatred. I shook my head as my back hit the shower wall. My knees grew weak, allowing myself to slide down to the floor. As my butt hit the floor of the shower, I felt it. I felt the foreign pooling of tears well up in my eyes. It stung in a weird type of way. I tried blinking them away before they could escape, but it was no use as a tear escaped from my eye and began its march down my flushed cheek. Instead of wiping it away, I continued to try blinking the rest away. To my disappointment, that only caused more tears to escape down my cheeks. I inhaled heavily, my head raised so that I was now looking up at the ceiling, with my legs brought up to my chest. My arms wrapped themselves around them, making me feel the slightest bit more secure. I continued staring at the cool, white paint on the ceiling until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. I don't know what I was expecting when I woke up. I knew what hoping to see when I woke up, but I guess I was expecting to just wake up alone in a bathtub. That turned out not to be the case. Instead of the cold marble of the shower floor, my legs were cocooned by the warmth of a familiar set of sheets. My senses were immediately invaded by his scent so intensely that it felt like he was in front of me. It's probably because he was. As my eyes opened and adjusted to the room around me, I discovered that I had been not only placed but tucked into our bed. Matteo sat at the edge on his side of the bed, watching me. If I wasn't wondering about what time it was so much, maybe I would have noticed the frown on his face and the sad look in his eyes a bit sooner than I had. What time is it? I asked as I pushed some stray hairs from my face. Like oatish, he said tiredly. My brows knit themselves together in confusion as I looked toward our window. Judging by the fraction of light that just barely managed to illuminate the sky and the fact that Matteo still had on the same clothes that he had on earlier, I assumed that it was 8 in the evening and not the morning. Oh, I think that's probably when I noticed it, the sadness and regret that washed over his face. I didn't want to be the one to acknowledge it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So I just rolled back over and tried closing my eyes. Again. Kai, what are you doing? Matteo asked. I could hear the pain in his voice, most likely caused by my rejection. I just didn't want to fight with him anymore. Going back to bed. I mumbled. Will you please turn back around? I want to see your face when I speak to you. His voice was soft and begging. My lips pushed themselves together in a flat line as I sighed. The way he spoke with such sincerity made an unsettling feeling swallow me up inside. Deciding to give in, I rolled back over so that I was facing him again. I didn't say anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We both just watched one another until one of us had the courage to speak first. If I could have hit a button and left him saying that on repeat, I would have. I should have never laid a hand on you, let alone grabbed you like that. No matter how angry I get with you, there will never be a circumstance when that will be necessary. He continued. I frowned as I thought about his apology. It was obvious that it was sincere. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that it wasn't. But I was questioning how far his apology spread, and yelling at me, chasing me around the house. I questioned, noticing how he managed to avoid apologizing for his verbal aggression. I'm sorry for chasing after you. And yelling at me. Nothing but silence followed my simple question. I had hoped for more, but expected nothing less. So, you're going to apologize for leaving a stupid mark on my arms, but not for screaming at me for trying to help you? I asked in disbelief. No, I'm apologizing for hurting you. I am not, however, going to apologize for being angry with you when you do something so stupid, he stated calmly. My teeth clenched together in anger as I looked at him in total anger. When I do something so stupid, I don't think I had the words necessary to voice how much he had just irritated me, so I chose not to speak at all. I flung the covers off of my body and rolled out of the bed. Kaya, Matteo warned, already knowing what was going to do. Anticipating my next steps, he managed to beat me to the door before I had time to even reach for the handle. Something so stupid. Really? Matteo? I snapped angrily, avoiding eye contact with him. You could have been hurt or even killed. I could tell he was doing his best to not raise his voice. But I wasn't. So you're allowed to protect me. But I'm not allowed to protect you. Not when you're their main target. He countered me. She was trying to attack you. I argued back in exasperation. Yes, because she wanted to get to you. I could hear the strain in Matteo's voice as it raised the slightest bit. He was moments away from losing his cool. Well, I would rather she go after me than you. That one did it. It was as if I threw a match on spilled gasoline. That will never happen. He snarled, becoming tense. I could see the intensity of his anger flare up within his eyes. This entire pack will be in ruins before anyone sets a hand on you. This isn't about your pack. I groaned as I angrily ran a hand through my hair. This is about us. This is about me and you. You protect me, and I protect you because that's how this works. You idiot. I'm trying to protect you, he shouted back at me, finally becoming just as outwardly angry as I was. You're the one who keeps putting yourself in dangerous situations. Oh my God. I screamed in frustration as my hands flew into the air. You were the one who was being attacked. I was just trying to help. Why would you even do that? Because I love you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You ever say something and not even realize it? Like the words just tumble out of your mouth before you even have the chance to process them? Well, I do a lot. Most of the time. I don't really care. But this time I wanted to projectile vomit. Silence followed my confession. The look of anger had disappeared from both of our faces. Shock stood in its place. Should I say I was kidding? Is it April 1st? Should I try to be like, but in a brotherly kind of way? You know you love me? Matteo asked, finally breaking the awkward silence. I f***ing said it. Didn't I? I huffed, crossing my arms over my chest. I refused to meet his gaze. If I did, I probably would just throw up right in his face. But like you mean it. He pushes, which only managed to make me feel more sick to my stomach. Did he not want me to? I'm starting not to. I was looked down at the floor when I felt Matteo's hand grab my chin, forcing me to look up at him. I don't know what I expected him to do. Maybe throw up in my face and be like, that's how I feel. I was caught off guard when he leaned his face down toward mine and found my lips with his. That weird feeling that I had felt when we kissed on our walk in the woods emerged. It felt like a fire had erupted within my chest that had spread throughout every part of my body, as if my veins were filled with electricity. Matteo's other hand settled itself on my hip and pulled me flush against him. Feeling his body against mine, I relaxed, but the fire burning within me didn't. If anything, it felt like the room was getting hotter. The tips of my fingers felt like they were holding sparks strong enough to electrocute someone. Too soon Matteo pulled away. Our foreheads rested on one another as we both stayed silent. My heart was thumping wildly against my chest. Usually I was pretty good at reading Matteo through his actions, but this time I was stumped. Was that like I just want to be friends kiss? Or you need to calm down? That's such an intense feeling that I don't have the capability to feel kiss. I wasn't following. I love you. There it is. If I didn't think that burning sensation within me could get any hotter, I was wrong. I think my organs were beginning to spontaneously combust at this point. Deciding that not enough action was happening for me right then, I grabbed both sides of his face and pulled it toward mine. Our lips met. Again. If I could have stayed like that for the next 50 years, I would have. Unfortunately, Matteo pulled back. He really loved leaving me hang today. Please understand how terrified I am that something is going to happen to you, he admitted softly. The thought of something happening that I could have stopped. I understand. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Cutting him off before he had the chance to even finish his sentence. I really do. But that's never going to change the fact that I will protect you with my life. It was strange for me to care about someone so much that I would rather die than lose them. But I couldn't help it. If I couldn't have him, then I didn't want anything. Never thought I'd be saying that. It was enough to send a shiver of disgust through me. It will never need to come down to that. Just trust me enough to listen to me. That's all I need from you right now. My teeth clenched themselves together. What does one say to a declaration like that? Trust him enough to listen to him. To have complete faith in he says. I don't even trust myself like that. There was no way that I could agree to that. Do you trust me? Of course I trust Matteo. I'd never trusted anyone more. But that would never stop me from risking my life for his. Maybe that's what love is. Trusting the shit out of someone until you get yourself killed. I realized I was silent for way too long as I watched Matteo's features become nervous. Instead of saying anything, I just brought my lips back to his. We were definitely best at showing our emotions through actions. I think it made both of us more comfortable than actually having to say it. Both of Matteo's hands rested on my hips and held me against him as our kiss remained soft. His warm lips making me melt more and more by the second. But I didn't want soft. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him impossibly closer to me. My tongue peeked out and slid itself across his bottom lip teasingly. Understanding that I wanted more than was getting, he allowed me in. Our kiss went from sweet and soft to lusty and passionate. Quickly. Maybe now wasn't the best time to do this, but timing has never really been on my side before. I knew what I was feeling in that moment, and it was far from angry or upset. I knew what I wanted, and a fight wasn't it. I wanted him, all of him. My hands pulled away from his neck and ran down his chest. A tingling sensation danced across my palms as the heat of Matteo's skin coming through his shirt met my hands, freezing at a point just above where his ABS began. I fisted the fabric of his shirt. I felt his breathing hitch slightly as I took a step backward and pulled him with me. One step after another. We eventually made it to the bed. I couldn't help but notice the hesitance in every move that Matteo made. A painful heat settled in the pit of my stomach as my back made contact with the blankets that were messily strewn across the bed. never breaking the kiss. Mateo moved on top of me. One hand was planted on the bed beside my head while the other hand caressed my cheek, which somehow managed to make our exaggerated, sloppy kissing seem almost gentle. His lips left mine, but never left my body as they trailed down my neck. My arms and legs ached, feeling the need to do something, but not being able to. It was as if I were glued to the bed. All I could do was let out a breathy moan and squeeze my eyes shut until I was seeing colors. Mateo, please, I begged, knowing that he was purposing his mark that happened to be mere centimeters from where his lips had stopped on my neck. It was making my throat feel like it was going to close in on itself the longer he stayed away. Finally giving in to my wants, his lips hovered over the sensitive spot before placing a gentle kiss to it. Almost instantly, my entire body felt like it had just fallen through the floor. FK, I snapped, my head falling back as my eyes squeezed shut even more tightly than they had been. He pulled away quickly, but my hands that still held onto his shirt stopped him from taking a step back. No, I mumbled hurriedly as I pulled him back to me. It was purely a fortunate accident, but his shirt managed to rip in the process, choosing to make my life easier. I resorted to tearing the rest of the shirt away from his body, revealing his well-defined torso. Mateo's hesitant returned, most likely brought on by my sudden shout. I could only assume that he was afraid that he was hurting me, or I was regretting what I just started. Mateo, please, I breathed, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him down to me. Obeying my plea, his soft lips returned to the sensitive spot on my neck, making my toes curl in pleasure. Mateo's fingers lightly traced themselves down the sides of my body until they hit the gap in fabric between my jeans and my shirt. They played with the hem of my shirt for a moment before I felt the cotton slowly being raised. He broke his contact from my neck to lift the shirt over my head. Instead of returning to my neck, his lips danced over the skin of my collarbones before eventually reaching the small bit of my breasts that were exposed. I internally groaned, wishing that I could bust out of a brawl like the Hulk. As if reading my mind, he unhooked the pesky piece of material, finding a new piece of material to play with, fiddled with the button of my jeans followed by the zipper. His assault on my chest raged on, causing my back to arch itself upward in satisfaction, looping his fingers into the belt loops. He made quick work of pulling the jeans from my legs. I moaned, feeling my body become even warmer despite the loss of clothing. Mateo, please, I begged as I raised my hips to his. He peered up at me through his thick lashes, his lips still lingering over the skin between my breasts. What do you want? He asked in a voice that was quiet yet firm. His warm breath danced over my skin, causing goosebumps to form all over my body. He didn't seem nearly as far gone as I was in that moment, but the breathlessness of his words proved that to be incorrect. Please, I pleaded, grinding my hips into his. I wished I had gotten rid of his jeans earlier when I had the chance. Koya, you need to tell me what you want, Mateo reaffirmed. The intensity in his deep voice made my stomach clench in need. I want you. Please? Mateo, I need you. Questions were out the window by that point. There wasn't a single thing on my mind other than the perfect fit of our bodies in that moment. Every kiss, every touch igniting an inferno that continuously consumed every cell of my body. A new type of ecstasy replacing whatever abstraction of it that I had before filled up every nook and cranny of my being. I knew what sex felt like. This wasn't just sex. My mind, my body, and my entire soul were entirely in the hands of the man on top of me. The man who not only sent my body into a frenzy, my insides into knots, and my mind into a hazy state of euphoria, but also owned every inch of my heart. It wasn't just sex. It was love.